people will be able to join us along the way. I'm just having a look now. I've got Sarah on. Good morning, Sarah. Morning, Debbie.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
I'm just going through all the blanks now that I've got now. Stephen Whittaker, good morning, Stephen. And
Good
Paul
morning.
Watson, good morning. So, Stephen and Paul, if you want to speak, I presume you're coming on a different network, computer. So, do you not have the screen that we've got?
I don't know what screen you've got.
Right, so I'll try and remember when we've come to questions that I ask you guys first, and then you don't get left out, and just in case. If you don't want to ask a question, that's fine, but it just gives you the option if you do. Right then, so welcome to the members of Education and Children's Services Scrutiny Committee, and also to any viewers who have tuned in this morning. As this is a virtual meeting, there may be unforeseen technical difficulties. However, we aim to keep any such difficulties to a minimum. Members, please ensure that your microphone is muted during the meeting and only switched on when you are speaking. Any members joining the meeting today using a mobile phone can mute and unmute by pressing *6. This will ensure that background noise in your location will not be picked up throughout the meeting. After each item has been presented, the committee will be asked to indicate whether they wish to speak by typing RTS in the instant messaging facility. And for the two gentlemen that haven't got that, I presume I will ask you, do you want to speak? Introductions this morning, the officers are Sarah Callahan, Director of Education and Skills, and Debbie Duffel, Head of Service, Early Help, Children and Wellbeing, Family Wellbeing, sorry. So over to Brian or Gary, who's going to do the apologies, please.
It's me, Chair Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
We have County Councillor Lorraine Beavers replacing County Councillor Nikki Hennessy, County Councillor Bernard Dawson replacing County Councillor Sabir Malik. We have apologies for County Councillor Smith, apologies from Janet Hamid, and Stephen Whittaker is attending in place of Dr. Sam Johnson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, I've just had apologies from Mr. Simon Smith as well.
Simon Smith, right.
Chair, could I just give Councillor Cheatham's apologies? She's trying to get onto the system.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to item 2, disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Members are asked to consider any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests that they have to may have to disclose in the meeting in relation to matters under consideration on the agenda. It would be helpful if members could be specific about the item in which they have an interest and the nature of the interest declared. Are there any this morning, please?
Yes, Chair. As we're talking about early years, both myself and my wife are governors at Bacup Maintain Nursery. It's a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you. That was Peter Steen then, Brian, if you want to note that down.
Andrea,
yes?
Andrea, sorry to interrupt. I presume I need to declare, as I usually do, that I'm a governor at Ribbleton Avenue Infant School, St Ignatius Primary School and Preston's College.
Oh, that's lovely, Jenny. Thank you. Brian, did you get that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2020.
Move those, yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy. Has anybody want to bring anything up on those minutes? No? Happy to move on. Thank you. Item 4, shaping the future of multi-agency early help in Lancashire. Ladies, would you like to bring your presentation forward? The purpose of this presentation is to share what good early help is, an update on Lancashire early help offer, what is working well, what we could do better, what we are putting in place to strengthen our early help offer, and to invite scrutiny to challenge on the identified areas for priority. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for inviting us this morning. So as
Andrea said, I am Sarah Callahan, the Director of Education and Skills, and Debbie is the Head of Service for Children and Family Wellbeing Service. And what we're going to do is talk you through the presentation that we circulated prior to the meeting. I think somebody's attempting to put it on the screen, but have we hit a bit of a technical hitch?
Sarah, it is on the screen.
Oh, is
No,
it?
it's not on my screen.
Not on
Oh.
my screen.
And it's not on mine, Chair.
Not on mine.
Not on mine. Not on mine.
Oh, good. I thought it was just me.
No, it's not on my screen either.
It's on my screen.
Okay. Is it Garth that's trying to put it on the screen, or?
Yes, Chair, this is Brian speaking. Democratic Services staff are putting this on the screen for you. Bear with us just a moment while we check.
Okay, whilst you're checking, I'll just give by way of introduction then. What we were going to start with was a definition of early help, because I think one of your members just then, in terms of your declarations, said as it's early years, made a declaration, and it's quite a common misunderstanding. Early help can happen at any stage in a child or young person's life. So obviously, by identifying issues in early years, we can be more effective. But actually, early help could be required, for instance, when there's a teenager who's perhaps come out of care and is going back into the family and requires a support package. So it's not necessarily something that happens in early years. However, to do it well in early years, to identify risk in early years, helps us be more effective in early help. I hope that clarifies the difference. So in terms of what we mean when we talk about early help then, oh great, I think it's on the screen now, so if we flick onto the presentation.
Yeah, I can see that, Andrea.
Has anybody not got it on the screen?
No, I haven't got it on, Chair.
I'm on
Councillor Eaton.
Andrea, I haven't got it on either.
Right, so have you got your pack through with it in?
Yeah.
Right, so for the ones, unfortunately, that can't see it this morning, can you refer to your pack so that we can keep moving?
Great, thank you. So I'll make clear which slide I'm talking to. So if you're looking at the pack,
if you read the heading at the top.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, so I'm starting with what we're aiming to share with you today. So we're going to start with, what does good early help look like? What's our Lancashire offer? And this is really important because Debbie is Head of Service for Children and Family Wellbeing, but early help is everybody's business. It's a partnership response. So although we have a local authority service that delivers early help, it's critical that our partners work well with us to do this effectively, and I'll pick that up through the presentation. Then Debbie's going to talk us through what's working well and the evidence to support that. So how do we know we're making a difference? And then we'll pick up on what could we do even better, and what are we putting in place to strengthen our early help offer in Lancashire. And then we'll pause to take your questions and invite your scrutiny and challenge. If we move on to the next slide, please. So I'm starting then with the definition. So effective early help is about early identification. And that early identification is about identifying where a child may need some additional support to enable them to reach their full potential. And it's not exclusively working with children, it's working with the family. So if we want to prevent things from getting worse, and for children and families having to require statutory services, so social care, we want to be better at looking at, well, what's the risk factors and how do we identify those risk factors early on and put around that family the right support. So just to give an example of that, it could be where there's a family with mental health issues or drug and alcohol misuse. So there's some risk factors in that family that are going to impact, and if we don't do something about them, it'll mean the children don't end up going to childcare, they don't end up doing well in terms of school, and they could end up worst case scenario in criminal justice services. So that's why it's cost effective to identify earlier, but it's also better for that family. Okay, so if we move on then to the next slide. So what does really good early help look like? You'll know that we are inspected for safeguarding, and one of the critical areas they look at is early help. So how effective are all our partnership arrangements to effectively identify and put around the support to those families at risk of not doing well? So it's about identifying early, it's about having a partnership response, and it's about using locally agreed thresholds. What that actually means is, when is that risk at such a point that we need to intervene and put some support around it? So that's why it's really important that across all the different partners, health, education, police, we understand what those thresholds are and we use them consistently. What it also looks like is having that ongoing review of the support that we put in place. And the reason that's so important is to see that it's actually making a difference. So we could say, okay, we'll put in some parenting support, but if then we don't review that, we don't know, are the family accessing the parenting support? Is it having an impact on the attendance at school? So it's really important that we have a constant process for review. And one of the ways we do that is by auditing the cases that we hold for early help. So just like in social care, we'll look at the quality of support that's put in place, the timeliness of the support that's put in place, but most important of all, the difference it's making to that family and what's the evidence to show that it's making a difference. So that could be attendance at school. It could be that the family are now turning up for the health appointments. So it's about being clear about what support does this family require, have we put it in place, and is it making a difference? We also need to have strategic partnership arrangements so that we know that all of us are collaborating and putting the right resources around these families to better meet need. And we also need to use research and evidence from serious case reviews. So these are the cases where things go really, really badly wrong. So for instance, we might have a child death, and what we'll look at in that serious case review is what partners were involved, what agencies were involved with this family, and could they have done anything differently? And the learning from those serious case reviews then helps us to put in place the right support so that things don't go wrong again. So it could be about sharing information. So for instance, a child, you know, in some of the very famous cases that you will have heard of, Daniel Pelker, for instance, was a really sad case a while ago where a child was eating out the bins at school. And what happened was that information wasn't shared effectively with the right agencies, so nothing was done about it. And then obviously, tragically, it ends up in a child death. So it's about partners understanding their responsibility in terms of sharing information, but also putting in place the right support at the right time. And it's about us strategically enabling that to happen. So I'm going to pass over to Debbie now, who's going to talk about how we do that in Lancashire at the moment and what works well and what things we're able to improve. And then I'll come back to talk about our next steps and then invite your questions. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Can we move to the next slide, please? So as Sarah referred to in her introduction, Lancashire has got a dedicated early help service, a response, and that is referred to as the Children and Family Wellbeing Service, of which I am the head of. And our focus and our ambition and vision for the service is very much about improving outcomes for our children, young people and families, identifying when we can support them to achieve that at the earliest opportunity. So very much around strengthening our focus on outcomes, particularly for those most vulnerable children and families. We have our ambition where we really do address the issues that children, young people and families are facing on that local footprint. So we work very closely with children, young people and families in our neighbourhood settings across the neighbourhood centres that we have available to us. We also deliver support to children and families in some other settings, including schools, including community settings, and very much including delivering support directly to families in their home. One of the key components of our early help offer is to make sure that we align the provision and the support that we deliver with our educational provision, again, at that locality base, so that we can work alongside our partners in our educational settings, because we know that most children and young people access childcare or go to school, and that's where we can gain access to them more readily. We also have to ensure that, there's many changes happening across children's services for Lancashire County Council at the moment, and I'm sure you're all aware of the language that we use and the implementation of a new way of working for children's social care that we now refer to as family safeguarding. So as well as delivering an early help offer, we have to ensure that we work alongside and integrate with other parts of the children's system. Can we have the next slide, please? Sarah referred to earlier in terms of our application of thresholds, and this slide presents the guidance that we use to help us and other professionals be able to identify and assess where children and family needs are presenting, so that we can then make sure that they are able to access the right provision and the right level of support at the right time for them. So again, in terms of the language that we use to describe this, this is the windscreen that you can see is what we have agreed across Pan Lancashire, so working with partners in Blackpool and Blackburn with Darwin, to identify where, as partners, we fit in the continuum of need and where children and families can access the right level of support for them. I have implemented a new early help model on the 4th of January this year, and very much we have structured ourselves and positioned our resources so that we can respond to need at various different levels. I'm just going to refer to them just to give you a bit of an understanding in terms of what that means. So if we look at the green kind of level 1 universal, this is where all children, young people and families can gain access to any support, any information and guidance that they may need. So people who provide universal support are people like schools, people like GPs, health visitors, school nurses and so on. So any one of us, when we need to gain that information, can access that provision. There are occasions when some families, some children, young people and families need just a little bit more support, and that then takes them into that level 2 of Universal Plus. So this is around where perhaps an agency can support that level of need on their own, and where they can deliver that directly as a one-to-one support with schools. I have built into my early help model, what we've just introduced, dedicated resources where we will continue to work to respond to needs that meet that level 2 Universal Plus. And we do that predominantly through the delivery of group work, such as parenting programs, and where we deliver support programs to young people. On occasions, needs again do escalate for families. We know that levels of need change quite often on a daily basis for families, and we need to be able to provide a response appropriately. So again, in the new service model that we've introduced in January, we have dedicated a discrete amount of my resources to respond to this more complex need, this intensive support at level 3. And this is where we will do most of our one-to-one work with families. It may be that we are also working alongside other partners to deliver various different types of support, and that will be from partners who are best placed to deliver the right support to families. But we, as Children and Family Wellbeing Service, will hold the rein for that family and coordinate all of the support that we feel will help them to improve their outcomes and meet the needs that are presenting. So we refer to that as intensive support. So I have got a significant amount of my resource that is dedicated to delivering family intensive support. And the ambition for that is that we can work alongside our colleagues in children's social care, and we can support families who perhaps are currently being supported through statutory services. And actually, it's not the best place or the right place for them to be. So we will support families through that intensive support resource to step down, as we call it, from statutory services. And we will also work with families who have got complex needs and who are at risk of needs escalating, leading to needing specialist support. So hopefully through the delivery of that intensive support from Children and Family Wellbeing Service, we can prevent that escalation and we can help that family before they need to have that statutory intervention. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the next slide, what's working well? I think it's important to recognise that we do things well in Lancashire with regard to delivering early help support. And I've been here to Education Scrutiny before to talk to you about a programme that we were engaged in, or have been engaged in since 2015. So the national programme, the Troubled Families Programme, was an initiative that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government introduced to us in 2015, and we were fortunate enough to be accepted on that programme. It is a complex programme, and each local authority that takes part is given a target number of families where we have to evidence that the support that we deliver has had a positive impact on the family's outcomes and has achieved significant and sustained change for that family. And you can see from the slide here that there's criteria that we have to meet to be able to engage with the programme. So 6 criteria includes crime and antisocial behaviour. It includes education levels of need, children in need, so those children that have been identified through statutory services as being classified as children in need, families that are experiencing financial inclusion, and then families who are also at risk of or experiencing domestic abuse. And then finally, the last criteria is where families have been assessed as having particular health concerns or issues. So throughout the programme, we've supported families with lots of needs, and many of the families we support have many of the 6 criteria, so it's not just a single level of need that we're responding to. Since the start of the programme in 2015, we were set a target of working with 8,620 families up to 2020. And then through the spending review, the government expanded the programme for another year. So we've got an extended year taking us through to March 2021. And in that year, we were set a target of 1,444 families, where we had to evidence that we've made significant change. So in total, since 2015 up to March this year, we have to be able to demonstrate and provide evidence that we've worked with over 10,000 families. And I'm delighted to say that as a result of the work that the Children and Family Wellbeing Service has delivered, alongside many partners, we have achieved those full targets. So in advance of the March deadline, we have now demonstrated that we have improved the life chances for over 10,000 families. So as well as that fantastic outcome, being able to secure that has led to the investment of over £18 million for the local authority. So by being able to demonstrate the impact that we've had, has secured that additional income from the local government programme. Next slide, please. So as part of our work, I talked to you before about the importance for us. It's not a single agency response to early help. It's very much about working in partnership and working alongside partners in the wider children's system. Particularly for us at the moment, there is a key focus on ensuring that we work alongside the colleagues delivering the new family safeguarding model. So family safeguarding is a new way of working for those in statutory services that again is being implemented from the 4th of January this year. So it was really important that for the early help part of the system that we also implemented any new ways of working for early help at the same time, because it's very much the foundation of where families, children, young people and families may start before they need to enter into that safeguarding approach. So there was a big piece of work. I've currently introduced a new staffing structure that delivers early help. It involves over 650 staff, and we've had to support those staff through the whole of 2020 to go through a restructuring process. As big as a task as that has been and as challenging as that has been, underpinning all of that, there's also been a significant amount of work to make sure that the practice that we deliver to support early help is robust and as effective as it can be. So these are some of the key pieces of work that have also been ongoing during 2020, as well as the restructuring. So we've been working very hard on redesigning and redefining our practice standards, again, so that they align very closely with the standards that children's social care colleagues work to in response to delivering support, particularly, as Sarah mentioned earlier, when we have had opportunities to learn from serious case reviews. So when we have been involved in serious case reviews, lessons learnt from those reviews, we've taken that to influence and change where needed any of our practice standards so that we can hopefully avoid those significant and serious events happening in the future. We're also working closely now with my colleagues in our multi-agency safeguarding hub, so our front door, the MASH arrangements, so that we can make sure that when partners submit contacts or requests or referrals into our front door, that we know exactly what is the right pathway to respond to the needs that are being presented, and that we make a safe decision about the thresholds that we are being asked to consider. And this is really important for me because this is the key to the door, and it stops families experiencing delay in getting the support that they need. It stops families having to go through that revolving door where they're going to one service for a time and then they're coming back out of that service because it's not right for them. So it's really important that the pathways and the arrangements and the relationship that we have with our multi-agency safeguarding hub are robust and that they are clear for everyone to understand and apply. As part of the transition work and the implementation of my new service model, we have redistributed some of our resources. So prior to January this year, we had family support workers who are the frontline practitioners who deliver that work with our children and families. And we had some of that resource in social care teams, and we had some of that resource in my early help structure. And as part of the implementation of the new early help model, we have redesignated a significant amount of family support worker resource so that it now sits completely with early help. That allows us to grow the capacity of frontline practitioners that we have so that we can hold more cases at an early help level and hopefully prevent those from escalating to more costly statutory services. And it also means that by growing the capacity, I can work with colleagues in family safeguarding to help that safe transition and step families that currently are in social care back out of the system and to be supported through an early help response. Another big change that's happening since the 4th of January is that myself and my service will take responsibility for the delivery of what we call family time. So this is court instructed support and provision, previously referred to as supervised contact. So this is where families, children and families, are currently in the court process, and it is being considered whether it is safe and appropriate for them to remain in that family environment or not, or whether they need to be taken into the care of the local authority. And during that period, the court directs that we have a statutory duty to make sure that those children and those families maintain contact until that final decision is made. So again, as part of my remodelling, I have established a dedicated team, resource of staff, who will purely focus on the delivery of family time, so that we can make sure we meet our statutory duty and we can manage that demand with the capacity that we have, because it is quite significant. Again, very much around working in an integrated way. I think we've made a lot of progress in terms of working alongside our colleagues in children's social care in a more coordinated way. But this is absolutely key for us to go forward and strengthen even more, because families, as we know, sometimes have to travel that journey between social care and statutory services and early help. And we have to make sure that we can make that journey as smooth as possible and as effective as possible for our families. This involves quite a lot of cultural change, and because sometimes our structural arrangements mean that we work in different environments and we report through different governance arrangements, sometimes that has an impact on the way that we work kind of in delivering that approach. So there is some cultural change activity work going on where we strengthen right from directors, senior exec directors, right through to frontline practitioners, so that everyone absolutely recognises, values and respects the contribution that we all make to supporting our children, young people and families. And next slide, please. So to address some of those things that I've just tried to talk you through, there are things that we're already putting in place. We are moving at pace. Everything doesn't happen just by introducing a new staffing structure or a new model and a new way of working. There are things that we have to keep taking forward, keep driving forward, and keep reviewing to make sure that we are actually achieving what we want to achieve. So some of the things that we've put in place to support the implementation of our new early help offer, you'll see from the slides that we have got a development plan, if you like, to recognise that some of these things are ongoing. And I talked to you about the number of staff that I have now got available to me in this new service model. And it's a blend of staff who perhaps have come from different places. So we've recognised that there will be a blend of skills and experience that the staff bring to the team. And we have to make sure that we have an appropriate workforce development programme so that it supports and builds the confidence of colleagues to be able to deliver the roles, but also that it's the right kind of training programme where it is something that will continually improve our practice. We also have now got in place a pathway and a mechanism whereby our managers and heads of service in our front door, the multi-agency safeguarding hub, and myself from early help will come together to jointly manage and have oversight of cases that need an early help response. And that is to make sure that we are, first of all making appropriate decisions about cases that are presented to us, that we are all recognising and responding to the appropriate level of risk for cases that are coming to us through that front door pathway. So we have got mechanisms where we will have joint management oversight and joint decision making processes to enable that to happen. We are strengthening our integration with social care, keep talking about that step up and step down arrangement, but it's really important that when decisions are being made about children and families that lead to a decision about what kind of support that they make, that all partners who have got a role to play contribute to that decision. Because sometimes thresholds are applied inappropriately, decisions are made that may not be the right decision, which leads to a family not getting the right support that they need at the right time. And so in order to manage, monitor, challenge and scrutinise our work, we have introduced and embedded a refined quality assurance framework. So this is our approach to how we will audit our work. We do that internally as a service. So every role within my staffing structure has a part to play in that audit process. But in addition to that, we are working with our Lancashire's Safeguarding Inspection Audit team that is headed up by Andy Smith to ensure that we get independent scrutiny and audit as well. So it's a bit like us, we do our own, marking our own homework, if you like, and then actually somebody else moderates that and scrutinises that. And I think that's a really key step forward for us so that we can reassure ourselves and everybody that what we think we can find when we look at our work is actually a true reflection. And if we can achieve all of that, I think I'm pretty confident then that we're doing all we can to ensure that families will get the best help that we can offer at the right time for them. My commitment and my mantra in terms of the reasons and the vision for early help in Lancashire is that we want to deliver early help to be the best it can be so that families can be the best that they can be. Next slide, please. Sarah mentioned early on that early help is not just the responsibility of the local authority. Early help is the responsibility of everyone, and that is very much embedded in our Working Well with Families guidance. It's embedded in many of the national documents that we refer to, and certainly Ofsted Inspection take that approach. So we very much have to work alongside all of our partners in the local community settings and in a strategic kind of governance arrangement to make sure that we all recognise and value, again, the contribution that we all make from various different agencies. I work very closely with many partners, particularly schools, particularly with our health visitors and school nurses and midwifery. I work very closely with our colleagues in children's social care and statutory services. Colleagues in our health sector have invested significantly recently to introduce what we refer to as primary mental health nurses and support teams that work predominantly in that early help environment. And again, we need to build and strengthen those relationships between that system. We know from the data that we've got access to that predominantly when requests for support or referrals come into our front door to the MASH, the highest referrer, or one of the highest referrers, is our school settings. And that is because children predominantly are all attending various different sectors within that educational environment. So nurseries, primaries, higher education, secondary schools and so on. And that environment is probably one of the strongest environments where the early presentation of any risk or any need can be presented. And as part of recent developments, I'm not sure if you've heard the language or the terminology of team around the school, but it is something that under Sarah's direction, we have implemented initially during the period of COVID, but this has got a long-term ambition. This is a long-term ambition for us. And this allows us to wrap services around schools across the county in various different clusters. So across Lancashire, we have pulled together all of the school sectors into 30 clusters across the county. And myself and other colleagues in other parts of the children's system have linked ourselves to each of those clusters, so that we can bring multi-agency partners together to respond to the needs of vulnerable children in those educational settings, and hopefully those address the needs of those at particular risk of exclusion, or those pupils that are and families that are considering the elective home education. Certainly working alongside my colleagues in the inclusion service to address and support those children and young people that may have special educational needs and disabilities. So the team around the school approach and the family safeguarding approach are building blocks, if you like, that we contribute to from an early help perspective. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah. I'm conscious that I'm seeing on my screen there's 10 new messages, so I will have a look at the chat while Sarah's talking you through what we want to prioritise as our next steps in terms of embedding the new model of early help.
Thank you, Debbie. So it is the final slide, everyone, and I think Debbie's talked us through some of the things that are working really well. You know, for instance, top in the region for the troubled families, which means not only are we supporting improved outcomes for those families, but it's also a payment by result model, so it brings money into the council. So there's some things that are working really, really well. But what do we need in terms of strengthening them? I think Debbie's remodelling, as she's described, is critical to us having that strengthened relationships with social care and our partners. So in terms of next steps, I think Debbie talked to this, didn't she, about if we want the practice to be consistent and good and safe, then we need to support our staff. So Debbie's introduced some practice standards, and what that will mean is this is what good looks like. We're training you to enable you to deliver against these practice standards, and then the audit cycle checks actually are people delivering against those practice standards. So we've shown you what good looks like, we've trained you so that you're able to deliver to be that definition of good, and then are we seeing that coming through in the audit of cases when we do our audits. The other bit, I'm not just going to repeat all of this, those joint management oversight arrangements. So when Debbie was talking us through that threshold of need, if we're going to be managing more complex cases, it's really important in terms of risk management that we have oversight from social care around managing those cases that are a bit more challenging. The partnership bit is absolutely critical, because I think the way Debbie talked about it in terms of things like collective home education, you've probably heard me say before that elective home education is something that's really rapidly increased. So between 2015 and 2019, there was a 50% increase in the numbers of children that are being educated at home. That's not necessarily a risk in itself, but sometimes those children have other risk factors, so they might have an education, health and care plan, or they might be open to early help. So if there's an additional risk, they could become invisible. So we need to make sure that we sustain contact with them, and that's part of our partnership early help response, sharing that information but working collaboratively across inclusion, across education, with early help to make sure that we're not just looking at early help in terms of cases that come in, but also in a preventative way about understanding the risk that leads to poor outcomes and putting in the support that prevents that. Debbie's talked about the closer support for the school approach, and this is very much, as Debbie described, making sure that rather than saying, oh, our key stage 4 secondary school outcomes are really good across Lancashire, but in some areas they're perhaps not as positive, rather than just solely thinking about the educational outcomes, we think about the barriers that are preventing that child from even feeling able to learn in the first place. If they are experiencing domestic violence, they're not going to be worried about the attainment. So again, it's about identifying those barriers and putting the support in place to address them. That's a critical part of partnership early help. And again, as Debbie said, the remodelling and audit action plans, having that external scrutiny through Andy's team is really important, because although we have got that established audit cycle, it's really healthy to invite that external scrutiny. And sometimes what we find is you can get sucked in onto the behaviours that are being exhibited. So for instance, the child's not turning up at school, but then you can sometimes miss what's going on in that family. So it's really important we have a holistic approach to that's the end game, that's how it's playing out for the family, but what are the issues that are contributing to that, and who do we need working with us to support that? So it could be some of the trauma informed work that we've been doing with our schools, you know, looking at the impact of parental bereavement, for instance, that then plays out in behaviour that escalates, ends in exclusion, ends up in a child being in the PRU, and then perhaps in the criminal justice system. So that partnership aspect of early help can't be overemphasised, and that's why I started this presentation with saying it's everybody's business, just as we say in social care. So I'll pause there because I know it's been a long presentation, so I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. So back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are we going to take the slides off, please? Thank you. So, ladies, I want to thank you for your very in-depth presentation this morning, quite a long one for councillors to take on, but very, very interesting. I did say that we'd start by asking Stephen Whittaker. Have you got any questions, Stephen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of information there, really useful to kind of hear that. I think there are lots of questions, but I'm conscious I want to limit them so that other folks get a chance to ask them. But I think one of the key questions for me is the COVID impact, and particularly in terms of family breakdown, domestic violence, and the potential additional resource. It's all over the media that mental health is considered to be a major concern. And I think given the fairly early days of what is this new structure in terms of early health, has the local authority thought about front loading, if you like, resource to try and meet what is likely to be a steep increase in demand in the next kind of 12 months? I just throw that one out there as a question for consideration.
It's an excellent question, and I'll start, and I'm sure Debbie will have more to contribute, but particularly on some of the issues that are referenced, you know, if we had problems before COVID for some of our vulnerable children, so for instance, the elective home education exclusions, for instance, they've all been exacerbated. So we know we've got increased referrals for elective home education post-COVID, and we know that some of our most vulnerable families have become more vulnerable because of that. And some of the things we've already done is we've moved our early help partnership officers into school improvement. So when Debbie was talking about that team around the school approach, we've got an early help partnership officer attached to each of the 5 localities. So we've modelled it on the health integrated care partnership model. So we've put in additional resource there, and we've also are in the point of recruiting 2 children's champions, one for primary, one for secondary, which will focus on early health, elective home education, exclusions, some of those areas of risk that we knew were a problem pre-COVID. And we've also been meeting weekly as a partnership with our health colleagues, so our commissioning health colleagues, our public health colleagues, our mental health colleagues. We've been meeting on a weekly basis with the education teams and also with Debbie's service, so that when the schools have been risk assessing which vulnerable children should be in school, in instances where we know that they've not, we've got the right service identified across Lancashire by area to support and sustain contact with that family. So there are a number of things we've already done. And we're looking to do more. We're in the process of looking at putting in additional resource in early years, particularly around those children with special educational needs. So I don't know, Debbie, is there other things I've probably missed there?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Stephen, I just want to respond to a couple of the points you've made there, and particularly, in terms of the challenging and difficult time that we're all facing due to the COVID pandemic and the restrictions that that's introduced. Right from the start, back in March 2019, I think we reacted very quickly and very effectively to just make changes to how we deliver support to children, people and families, because obviously there's many restrictions that we have to consider. So we have moved quite a lot of our support provision onto digital platforms. We do still maintain face-to-face family support. We still go into family home environments when we've risk assessed those environments and it's safe to do so, so that we have still got our eye on our most vulnerable families, and that they can still access through various different ways the support that they need through this COVID period. The other thing for me is, we have got a finite resource as a local authority early help service. And that finite resource has got a limit to the capacity of support and the work that it can deliver to children, people and families. So for me, it's really important that we make sure that we have got children, young people and families open to my service that we are supporting, that is the right level of support that they need. And we know that sometimes families get stuck in drift, and they get stuck by holding the hands of services when perhaps they no longer need that level of support. So we've done a review, and we've gone and looked at all the cases that are open to us to see if it's the right time for any families to access support through more universal provision rather than targeted early help. And by doing that, that has allowed us to increase our capacity so that we can work with more complex families as they are presenting. The other key component of this for me, and we talked about it in the presentation, is we have to support our partners also to grow their capacity and their confidence to deliver early help. Because without all of the resource across the early help system, we're never going to be able to respond to the demand that we know we're likely to be seeing as a result of the pandemic. I hope that answers your question.
Is that okay, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. I was just saying, I recognise there are massive challenges there, and I think your comments do kind of echo that forward, and I think the finite resource is a challenge, and I think we'll be put under pressure, and I know you know that, and it's good to hear you recognise it.
Thank you. The next is Paul Watson. Paul, have you got any questions? Thank you. Jimmy Eaton.
Thank you, Chair. Early help, right. First of all, when do we make the decision you mentioned about intervening to people. When do we make this decision, and who makes that final decision? In some cases, you may look back and think, well, should we have intervened earlier, or should we have waited? I mean, that is very important. And obviously, you've got the professional people there. Could you enlighten me on that, please, when you make that decision?
Yes, certainly. So there's various ways in terms of how we identify when early help may be needed. So I talked as part of the presentation, when a referral or a request for support for a family comes through that front door, the multi-agency early help hub, the multi-agency safeguarding hub, that's one way into the system. And if they come in that way, then it's the professionals who work in the MASH environment that's made up of qualified social workers, police, health, early help colleagues who consider what those needs are that are being presented and what level of support is needed. And once they make that decision, they then send that request for support to the right service. So it might come to me if it's an early help level of need, or it might go into statutory services. Another pathway into early help is from district children's social care teams. So where children and families currently are being supported through statutory services, if it is felt that the time is right and it's safe to do so, that family can be supported by early help. We have a pathway for that family to come out of statutory service, coming into early help. And again, that is a decision that is made jointly by professionals that are qualified social workers and senior practitioners in my early help service. And finally, we have a pathway where families can refer themselves. So families know exactly when they need help. They may not know what kind of help they need or what level of help they need, but they do know that they can reach out to us by making direct contact to us. And we can do that assessment about what level of need they have and what's the best service to respond to it. And then partners also can use that pathway, so they don't have to go through the front door. They don't have to be in social care. If a school or a GP or the police officer who's out on the front line on his beat comes across a family of children and people who we think, actually, they need some help here, they can also come directly to us and ask us to respond to that. We are a consent-based service, which means before we can start doing any work with children and families, we have to get their consent to do so. So we don't have any statutory duty where we can go and knock on somebody's door and say, you have to work with us. We can go and have that conversation and say, we're here to help you. We think we can support you to improve your outcomes. Would you agree to that?
Okay, Debbie, thank you, and also to Sarah for excellent presentation. At this moment in time, we are in difficult circumstances, but I've always found in my location that there seems to be a lot of depression with families and individuals, and sometimes it's too late to intervene, and that's not through your fault, but people don't seem to respond to their concerns.
I think that is an issue where people are experiencing challenges and difficulties and issues, even more so now in this pandemic. And I think this is another reason why it's absolutely critical that we, as a local authority early help partner, absolutely work alongside all other partners in those local neighbourhood settings, in those communities, because those communities best know those families in that setting. They best know what provision is available to people. But we have to make sure that we have the right mechanism where we can bring those people together so we all know what is available to be able to access.
Okay, finally, I was going to say thank you very much, and I think you're doing an excellent job, and good luck to the future. Thank you
very much.
And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jimmy. The next is Councillor Lorraine Beavers.
Thank you, Chair. I've really just got one question. It's the Troubled Families Programme. It's due to end in approximately 6 weeks, and it's helped over 10,000 families. So your remodelling, does that pick up on the work that's been achieved over the last 6 years? And if not, what are we doing as a council to try to petition the government to continue to fund what has been a great success and one of our great achievements over the last 6 years?
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. So the current phase of the programme, the extended year, runs to March 2021, as I said earlier. But when the spending review happened in 2019, prior to Christmas, it was confirmed that they were again going to extend another year. We haven't yet been told what that extended year will look like, so I don't yet know what the target is set for us or what that might involve in terms of the requirements of the programme or the money that's attached to that programme. So I'm still waiting to hear that. We are expecting to hear that soon. But I was delighted to hear that, particularly with the COVID situation and the expenditure and the investment needed to take us through this. The success of the programme has been recognised by the government, and they still want to make that investment. So I think that's a really positive thing. But if and when at any time going forward that programme does permanently end, I think we've still got the strong foundations in Lancashire, because the approach that we took when we joined the programme in 2015, unlike other local authorities, was not to have a dedicated team that only did the TFU work. What the decision was for Lancashire was that Lancashire's Early Help Service would be responsible for the delivery of the programme. So by doing that, we have embedded the principles and the practice of the programme in our normal daily work of early help. So it's not something that is reliant upon the TFU programme. It's there to, and we can sustain that approach going forward.
Thank you very much. That's great news. Thank you, Debbie, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. The next is Councillor Jennifer Main.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea, and thank you very much to Sarah and Debbie. I mean, that was a huge amount to take in, and you've obviously all been working really, really hard, and I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Just on the troubled families, the only problem, of course, with us taking it on is there will be no additional resources going forward unless we can persuade the government to give us additional resources. You know, it was payments on results, and we won't be getting those payments if it's stopped. So obviously we need to find the resource from somewhere. Just very basic questions. I think you've already answered one of them. You said you've got approximately 600 staff in the CFW service. Is that enough? I suspect it isn't. Elective home education, it has long been a huge worry of mine, and I've been, you know, trying to get something done about it for a lot of years, and nothing does. There are too many lobbyists that are for it. I understand that, but I just wondered, I mean, it is frightening that the numbers have increased by 50%. I know at one of the schools where I'm a governor, some children have been taken out to electively home educate, and they aren't capable. What are we doing as an authority to actually lobby the DFE, the government, to change the rules on I know we have a very small degree, but we should have the right, well, I won't say what we should have, but we need further rights, responsibilities to be able to ensure that those young people are thriving. And just a plea, really. Oh, well, one of the things was, Debbie, you just said to Jimmy Eaton that families can make direct contact with yourselves. How do they do that? You mentioned several times, what I think would be helpful, because it's a huge amount to take in, was if we had some kind of flow chart on where people go, because we've talked about the, you know, the team around the school clusters, the family safeguarding approach, the CFW approach. If we had some kind of big flow chart that showed us, you know, if a family comes and says this, they go here, and if the answer to that is there, they go there, and, you know, something like that. I can imagine it'll be a really, really tricky thing to do, but also I think it would help to clarify your services to your other partners as well. I think that was it for now. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want me to just pick up on the TFU?
Yeah, if you pick up on the TFU, I'll come back on the EHE. Debbie, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. So you're right, Jenny, and the TFU programme is a payment by results model, and we can only secure that investment if we can meet the criteria to demonstrate the impact that we're having. So to date, we have been successful to do that, so we have secured the full value of payment by results money. But the implementation of the new service model is not reliant upon the TFU income. So my budget has been, we've brought together the budget that was, some of it was sitting in children's social care, and that was covering the cost of the family support workers while they were in that structure. So we've moved the people into my new model, and we've moved the money. So my budget arrangements are made up by a contribution from the local authority and a contribution from the public health grant that we see. And it's that financial envelope that I've used to build the structure and dedicated resources to family intensive support, community kind of provision, and that team around the school approach. So by doing that, I think we are in a sustainable position when we're not reliant upon the future of the Troubled Families programme. It's very nice while we get that income, and I would like to have some more income and grow the capacity that we have, because, you know, like I said earlier, I have got a finite resource and there is a limit to what capacity that can deliver. We are expecting that there will be an increased demand as a result of COVID, whether while we're going through this remaining lockdown and while it's still an issue, or when we try to get back to some kind of normal, different way of working, when we think that demand may increase. We are expecting that there is some hidden demand out there that we've not been able to get access to because of the restrictions or because families are not being supported to access early help. So that's why we think, you know, we need to work stronger and better and more effectively with partners, because I haven't got any more money. It's not looking like I'm going to get any more money. And I've used the financial resources that I have available to do the best I can in terms of delivering early help for Lancashire.
Shall I pick up the question around elective home education, or did you want to come back on that one?
Jenny, does that answer that bit of the question for you?
It does, thank you. You know, I know that resources are always stretched, and they always will be. And I think you know, you do make fantastic use of them, but we do know that demand is going to rise exponentially, and I just think everybody needs to be aware of that. And you can only do so much without more resources.
Yeah, thanks
Debbie.
And just your last point about how do families self-refer, how can they do that? How do they get access to us? Well, we, in normal, I shouldn't say normal because this is normal, but pre-COVID, we did have 74 neighbourhood centres spread across the county in all of the local areas. But as a result of COVID, we closed them initially back in March, but we have now got 24 reopening, and we've got a plan to reopen more. So people can still walk into our centres and ask for support if it's needed. We also have access online digitally. We promote the offer and the services through our partners, so people can be supported to get access to that through digital platforms as well.
Okay, so if I just pick up your comments around elective home education, we have actually this week, Debbie referred to our team round the school meetings, and they've taken place every single week during COVID. So what we have there is all the different partners represented, as I referred to earlier, and I've decided to make them thematic, you know, so have a focus on a particular risk area. And this week we're meeting around elective home education, and what we've been getting is regular monthly updates. I've been getting regular monthly updates on the numbers of young people that are electively home educated, but then also have them refined by other vulnerable factors. So for instance, are they also open to early help? Are they eligible for free school meals? Do they have an education, health and care plan? Are they on child protection? So because elective home education in itself is not a risk, and as I said before, it's about if there's other risk factors, then it's in those cases that we need to reassure ourselves. So the objective of this thematic group is to revise our current protocol, because you made the point around, you know, the limitations in terms of what a local authority can do regarding elective home education. And it used to be the case that all we could do was check that those young people were receiving a suitable education. So the local authority had to visit within 6 weeks of those young people becoming electively home educated. They had to visit the families and see if they were getting their educational entitlement, which really gives you no reassurance around the other risk factors, as in, are they safe? But I don't know if you recall, but there was a really good, powerful document produced by Anne Longfield, the Children's Schools Commissioners, called Skipping School, that looked at the processes around elective home education, and that strengthened actually the guidance, which enables us to have a more input in terms of the reassurance around those other factors of vulnerability. So, for instance, in other authorities, what they've done is had a risk assessment for those elective home educated children, and we are looking at that model in the task group that I've just referred to. So, just to give you the reassurance, we're getting updates every month on the figures. We're looking at it by vulnerable groups. We're revising our protocols, and we're working with all the key services to ensure that where those young people do have another risk factor, that we have oversight of them. So, for instance, if they have an education, health and care plan, the inclusion service is working with us to revise that plan to reflect the fact that they are being electively home educated. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that this is something that we are aware of and are working with the right partners to ensure that if there is risk, we are managing that risk, because regardless of the current legislation, safeguarding, working together to safeguard children trumps, if you like, any other guidance. So if there is a safeguarding risk, we as a local authority still need to have that reassurance in place. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that's addressed your question.
It is very helpful, Sarah, and it is reassuring to know that you know now exactly who's dropping out of school to be electively home educated. But as you say, if they've got other vulnerabilities, you are aware of them. But what can you do about them? You know, the CFW service is consensual. You know, if you went to them and said, we think we need to support you, and they said, well, actually, I'm all right on your bike, what could you do about that? And even those that are entitled to free school meals, is there anything you can do for those children, families, if they are being electively home educated?
Well, I think you're right in terms of your challenge, and it is challenging. But I think in terms of consent, Debbie and I have just been on a bit of a journey for that, because that's not an issue that's distinct to elective home education, as you know. It's something we have to have in place to work with any of our families, and we've been working with our information governance teams to make sure that we don't make that a barrier. You know, it's how you approach that, isn't it? You know, you can be working and supporting a family and they are compliant within that without making it overly onerous. So we have had some headway in our management of consent, and it's consistent with good practice in terms of information governance. So every single authority across the country has that challenge, but we can't have that as a barrier. So it's about how do you engage with those families so that they see it as not a prohibitive issue, you know, that makes them back off. But if you're working with them and they can see that this is something beneficial, and you have the conversations in the right way, you'll find that most families do want to work with you if it's presented in the right way. So I think we've just gone through a process of reviewing that, because we'd recognised across early help that could be sometimes used as a barrier because we were making it overly complicated and onerous. And if you do that, then families do feel nervous because they're thinking, oh, why am I have to go through this big formal process? So it's about how you do it, and we're working with some colleagues from Derbyshire at the moment, particularly a lot on elective home education and consent issues and how we can support early help assessments around that, and they've been through that process successfully, so they will be joining us I actually think it's this week or it's early next week, to look at how they've managed to overcome that. So I'm aware of the challenges, but I'm also aware of good practice and ways of overcoming those challenges.
Thank you. Is that okay now, Jenny?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate that. But you haven't responded to my plea for a flowchart, if possible.
Oh, I'll take that away, Jenny.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you.
I have Jenny put it on my list to ask for. I noticed that Munsif and Anne Cheetham managed to get back on. You came back on during the presentation. You've got your papers there. Is there anything you both wanted to ask or that you didn't understand on the presentation?
Andrea, I got on pretty quickly. I just wanted to change over from mobile to Wi-Fi basically, so I didn't miss anything. So I'm quite happy. I got all the information. I've got some paperwork as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Anne, how did you get on? Don't know if she can hear. Anne, can you hear us?
I'm coming through. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I think the weather got my technology somewhere along the line. I do apologise. I want to thank everybody for the presentation and also the paperwork that came through, because there was a lot of information contained within that. And I know that we all have grave concerns, most probably in our own areas where we're more familiar with, where there most probably are some very great challenges within. The only thing that ever concerns me is us as a department, and I felt rather reassured actually by something that was said, that we work with social services and sometimes adult social services with children, with younger children particularly, where we do discover, which usually comes through the school, the amount of work those little people are doing to help their parent, because there are other problems with the parent concerned. That's where it just sort of just hits you a little bit, that they are a wonderful family and they help each other, but the responsibility that is put on some of the younger members of the family is really jolly harsh and terrifying, but they take it as part of the norm and they're not really getting their sleep, you know, to sort of build up those adrenaline measures that are necessary for school or the days that they miss from school for other reasons. But I do feel very reassured by everything that's been said today. In fact, I feel very proud of what is being achieved. There are great challenges, and we're certainly going to have more to come in different areas, but it seems to me that we have a very conscientious team, Chairman, and I do feel reassured, although I don't envy the future in some other things that may pop up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Susie Charles, Councillor Susie Charles, do you just want to come in? I know you've put a message on and you were still typing. Would you like to come in?
No, it's just I wanted to make that point rather than taking up airtime. I think it's really good that we do use good practice from other authorities as well, because, you know, it saves an awful lot of time. If they're doing something well, why don't we use what they're doing? So brilliant. Yep, thanks.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank the officers today. I know you're stretched to the limits and the presentation was fantastic, and you've obviously put a lot of work there and you're working hard with your new teams and the way forward. So I want to thank you all. You're welcome to stay on if you wish, and if not, God bless, keep safe, and we'll see you at further meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Take care.
Bye.
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 So we're now moving on to item 5, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme for 2020-2021. The next meeting will focus on the early years sector, which, if I get my notes, is the impact on private providers supporting vulnerable children and families, including update on the early years strategy and school improvement model. We've also got schools causing concern task group and the update and the recommendations. So that will be on our next meeting. We've got a special meeting as well that's coming It's arranged for
Andrea,
Tuesday. Oh,
Andrea,
yes, sorry.
sorry to interrupt, but if we're doing early years next time, can we also include the funding pressures on that?
Yeah,
Because,
put that down.
you know, COVID's exacerbated that as well, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, put that on the list. I'm sure the
Okay.
guys are going to pick it up there as well. There's a special meeting will be arranged for Tuesday, the 2nd of February at 2 o'clock. This is to receive a briefing from West Lancashire Clinical Commissioning Group, Southport and Formby CCG and Southport and Ormskirk Hospital NHS Trust on their Shaping Care Together programme and the transformation of hospital and community services provided to children in West Lancs and Sefton. Now, while we're having this as a separate meeting, it's going to health on the same day. Because health covers everything, I decided that I thought we should have our own meeting because we cover children's services and we want to look at that in depth. So I hope that you're all happy with that I made the decision to arrange to have that meeting in the afternoon on the same day so we could have our own questions, because I think otherwise we might get lost with everything going on. So is everybody happy that I've arranged that?
Fine.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Then we're moving on to item 6, urgent business. I've not got anything, and unless anybody's come up with anything, I've not heard anything. Item 7 is the date of the next meeting. So it's the ordinary meeting of Education Children's Services Scrutiny Committee will be held on the 9th of February at 10:30, but just take into consideration that we will have that extra meeting on Tuesday the 2nd of February. That will be in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. And I do hope that most of you or all of you will be able to attend. We won't be on Skype anymore, we'll be onto the new Teams, so hopefully we won't have all these problems we're having getting on. And if that's okay, I also want to thank all the officers from Children's Services and Education for the really work that they put into everything. They stretch to the limits, they don't stop, they prepare all the presentations, anything we ask them for, they always come forward and spend the time. As you know, it's really hard times at the moment. And I want to thank our officers, Craig, Garth, Gary and Brian, for their time as well, because I always forget them out. So I want to thank you guys. You put together, you prepare the papers, and there's so many things going on at the moment. I want to thank you for your time as well. So is Andrew coming through? Oh, Ed Nash, sorry, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yesterday at External Scrutiny, we looked at the programme. And the one point that might be coming up soon is whether we go into PERDA in April, which will change a lot of the programme round. So I'm just making the point without actually suggesting anything other than it's looked at.
Thank you, Councillor Nash. We have discussed that with officers, where it's going to come in. That is, they're already thinking about the future and what we'll be able to deliver on our programme. We got anything? No, that was a private message. So thank you. God bless to everybody. Keep safe. And we look forward to seeing you on the next meeting.
Okay, Andrea, thanks again, Chair, and good luck this afternoon, and I hope all goes well for you.
Oh, it will. I'm
Yeah,
fighting, mate.
same here, Andrea.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
And it was lovely to get the messages about the dogs this morning as well. So to John, Jimmy, and I can't remember who the other one was, Sarah, telling us all about your dog. So it puts a smile on your face. Thanks. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.